All right. I think there's probably a negative, jaded view of the church already in the American populace. Because even before these extremist groups, which is what they are, you had the televangelists, the prosperity gospel people who conveyed, communicated a message to the public that was against the gospel of Jesus that we see in the scripture. And that's the case with Westboro Baptist, with Terry Jones, and some of these. I don't know that opinions have so much changed as maybe solidified that, oh, you know, we knew that church people were kind of crazy and extremist, and this just confirms that for us. Because unfortunately, any organization that has the word church in their title can't help but, by their actions, color the view of any organization that has the word church in their title.
So why do you think there's so much hate from these groups? Like Westboro's website is, I mean, I don't even want to say the word because it's...
Yeah.
You
God
know
hates
it.
fags.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's... I don't know what kind of journey you have to take to get to a place that that you can justify something that is so contrary to tradition, to written words that have been handed down over centuries. To say that God hates anyone is a fallacy that isn't proven in Scripture at all. I think that probably these people, and I go to their founders because Westboro has been led by one individual this whole time. Terry Jones is one individual at his church who's sort of founded this, that they appeal to, and I hate to stereotype, but it's going to sound like a stereotype. They appeal to a more ignorant clientele who's drawn to some sort of charisma, who's drawn to something they can really hang their hat on, you know, something that's strong and clear. And I think that feeds their ego to some extent. And their theology clearly is very skewed, very messed up, to believe that that they even speak for God. That brings with it, I think, a real sense of, a false sense of self-importance. And I don't know the mental gymnastics you have to do to get to that point, but you clearly have to totally ignore a huge part of church tradition, ignore a huge part of the scripture, ignore most of the teachings and life of Jesus to get there.
Awesome. Like you said, they try to back up what they say with scripture, and obviously that's not like, it's a little skewed, but like, how can they justify like what they do by scripture?
Well, I mean, I could pick out one little part of what we call the Bible and use that to justify anything. I could go to, in one of St. Paul's letters, he talks about women should cover their heads and worship, and they should be quiet. And I could say, well, then all women who come into our church building better have their heads covered, and they better not talk, because Paul said it. Well, when you look at the whole context of what Paul is saying, he's trying to settle disputes in a congregation. And most of the arguments are coming from the fact that the women in tradition have not spoken. And now they're part of this new movement where women have authority, women have a say. Some of Jesus' closest followers were women. And they're grappling with that. So to ease some of the tension so they can hear part of what he's trying to say to the church leaders, which were men, he has to say, okay, keep the women quiet and then go on. And then I think a lot of that is personal opinion. I think our God is big enough that he allowed misconceptions of him to filter into Scripture. Because Scripture is not infallible in the sense that everything in it is 100% right. It's infallible in the sense that as it portrays a picture of who God is, it's infallible. As it portrays a picture of what salvation looks like, it's infallible. But, you know, Westboro Baptist, they use a lot of scriptures from Leviticus. And yes, there are scriptures in Leviticus that say, you know, if someone is engaged in homosexuality, take them outside the city and stone them to death. Where is that done today? Some Middle Eastern countries, mostly under Sharia or Islamic law. And it intrigues me that the very same people who talk about how evil Sharia law is and another religion is, they sort of grapple onto those same scriptures. But when you look at the whole context of Leviticus and the whole Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, God's talking about how do we live holy. Well, today in the year 2013, we don't do a lot of the things that says in Leviticus. I mean, every time I eat pork, am I not being holy? Every time I consume a glass of wine, am I not being holy? No, it's about authenticity of heart. And so to just pick out a scripture here and there to back up what your opinion is, we can do that all day long. But again, you have to neglect a whole huge portion of scripture to make that work. So.
Awesome. And just say your name and your title.
G. Sprague. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Brian Neeson. I'm the pursuit pastor at Crossroad.